Hi everyone, this is a tutorial on how to do class 2s at the interproximal when you have opposing class 2s, so mesial distal of two adjacent teeth. It's something that is very common for us as dentists to face in clinical dentistry, and one of the key issues that we see is that dentists tend to do one restoration at a time, and what that can lead to is an overfilled restoration and then an underfilled restoration. And we're not just talking about overhangs and that sort of thing. It becomes exceedingly difficult when you fill these restorations one by one to get an ideal contact point. And so this is the technique I would use clinically, just my personal opinion, to avoid the pitfalls of those sort of relationships. So the first thing that we need to do is size up matrices. For this technique, we're going to use sectional matrices. This is the Garrison system. And the reason that I like the Garrisons is because they're very light in terms of the gauge of the metal. It's quite soft, and that means that it has a lot more flexibility and is very, very forgiving. You can see that this wedge is, look, it's a good 2 to 3 millimeters higher than the embrasure. So sorry, not this wedge, this matrix band. So we can't use this one. We could step it back and not have that nice little lip in the center of it and use one of these green ones, which is often okay for molars. I just apply a bit of finger pressure while I'm guiding it in. It's really, really important to have the floor of the band inside the gum. You don't want to have it compressing on the gum because it can cause deformation of the cervical part of the band, so you want to just seat it in. I generally go from one side to the other and then just gently, sometimes I like pull the bottom of the band and then just gently some finger pressure and it will just seat in. That to me is still too high on the embrasure. Okay, even though it's sitting into the gum nicely, I want one that is really, really matched. We'll go down one more size. Next one is purple, okay? And again, just a bit of pressure and you can just see the difference there. You can see how that is sitting exactly where the embrasure would be. I'm just going to pull it out a bit more to the side. And that's important because it means that we have less interference with our instruments when we're doing the restoration. Making sure that the band is at the cervical. Now, sometimes it's still too high. This is a red one. It's got a nice little lip to it that's going to mean that it sinks lower. Sometimes I give them just a bit of curvature before I place them in. So again, from the side, placing the finger to apply a little bit of pressure and then pulling it through. Again, I want to place that as low as I can so that the embrasure is in the correct position. So then we're going to place our wedge. So we got to go and pick. I like to use the Triodent wedges. I like their design. I like the fact that they're not too heavy. Got a bit of flex, so they tend to maintain enough force, but not too much force on the bands. So that's too small. It's not applying enough force, so we'll go up a size. The next size is pink. So this finger is just resisting so that the band does not just come out occlusally. I think I always want to use the largest wedge possible. So now we're going to go with the purple. And there we go. Now some people use like Vaseline or like pawpaw ointment to get the wedges through. I don't know about how that leaves isolation, but sometimes you might do that just to make it slip through a little bit easier. Great, so the next step is that we're going to place our ring. Now the thing about rings is, in the mouth, if you put the ring in this direction, okay, if the non-active part of the ring is facing forward, you've got an obstacle in the way of doing the restoration, which is the curved part of the ring. So what's better clinically is if that we can place the ring to the distal in all instances. Now I like this ring because it has rubber and it tapers in quite aggressively at the floor, and it's got rubber in these areas here. Okay, so it doesn't last quite as long as some of the other rings that you find on the market. But because it has rubber, this blue rubber, like it's a bit softer, what it does is it has a little bit of deformation, so it actually yields to the shape of the tooth, and that's the exact property that I want in my in the ring. What we do is we overexpand much more than we need, we stabilize the ring, and then gently, making sure that we're on top of the wedge, we release the force, and then what we do is we just gently rock forwards and backwards as we're releasing to allow, just really slightly, just to allow it to seat. And you'll notice that there's a really nice intimate contact there. Now sometimes clinically as well, just to show you, what I will do is I'll also apply a finger just on top, just so that I know that the bands aren't dislodging occlusally. So then we need to use a composite instrument just to gently make sure we're not burnishing. This is not burnishing, this is just applying a tiny amount of force so that the intimacy of the contact point is established between the two bands. And because of the force that these rings apply between the teeth, as long as there's just an intimate touch all the way along that embrasure, you're gonna have no problem with your contact point. So we'll check as well, just with the probe, just to make sure that we've got a nice seal there. No issues with the seal, it's all really great. So now we're good to start the restoration. All right, so I'm just gonna etch, direct etch, total etch, selective etch. I'm not gonna tell you how to do your etching. This is a plastic tooth after all. Just so I don't get water on the lens, I'm gonna cover the tooth while I wash this off. All right, so then we're just gonna apply our bond. And so in some instances, your microbrush will be too thick because like in this instance, I have to apply pressure and I'm gonna deform that intimate contact that I have between the two bands. So you don't wanna force your microbrush in there, but you need to get the bond to the floor. So you need to have multiple sizes of microbrush. See how this microbrush, in comparison, I'll just put some bond on it first. You'll be able to see the difference in size. So this microbrush is like a third of the size of the other one. So you want to have that on hand just in case you need it, so that you're not deforming the matrix. Just placing that in everywhere at both contacts. So this is an all-in-one, so a little bit of air. All right, now we can cure. So there's different versions of injection molding or your approach to doing fillings. The approach that I use is actually to apply a flowable to the deepest part of the cervical. So I've got hydrostatic force as I'm moving across, and then I'm going to intentionally take the flowable up to the corner. I'm trying not to have up and down movements as I'm applying that flowable. I just want to have the flowable applied right to basically the marginal seal and the floor of the restoration, so that I don't get voids in that key area. And it's a thin layer so that I don't get a lot of shrinkage that opens it up. So I'll do that for both of them, just at the floor, hydrostatic pressure, and then out towards the side. Now I let that settle for 5 to 10 seconds, just so that the flowable can settle right into into the floor of the restoration, and then I'll cure. So I generally use a heated composite. I'm just gonna apply a small amount directly into the cavity, a little bit of force. And then a nice, really narrow, skinny instrument. I like to use this one. So I want to keep that band position, that's really important. So if I see it deforming as I'm applying the pressure with the resin in, I'm gonna resist that. It's just a process for me when I'm doing this of pushing the resin. If I've got too much excess, I need to remove it. But I want to be pushing the resin kind of back in on itself. And you can just see how much material, like how much of a void now that I've got in this area. That's because I've been able to condense all of the composite kind of back onto itself. You can also use the probe just like that to get rid of excess. So there's 3 Key things in restorations: isolation, so you don't want to have any saliva or gaps at the floor of your matrix. That's really, really important. Condensation, and then that's the process that we're going through when we're pushing in the resin back in on itself again and again and again. And then angulation, so the angulation of the instrument that we're using. And then I've got my angulation, so I can follow the natural inclines of the tooth and just removing the excess with the probe. So I find that hydrostatic force personally quite helpful of injecting directly in to the restoration, just when I'm doing these increments. Now I'm going to remove the bands. I like to use the pin tweezer to remove the bands because I can activate it and then squeeze further down the pin tweezer. Squeezing here gives me the pressure without having to struggle too much. And you can see the flash is just everywhere. It looks terrible. Initially, all of these excess pieces, they come off, really, really easily. So there's 4 different sorts of soft flex. There's the red one, which is really, really coarse. And I only like to use that to smooth enamel or tooth structure. I try to use the dark orange for recontouring composite. And effectively what I want to do is I want to be approaching from these sort of interfaces to get the excess flash away. And what I want is, I don't want to cut down into that embrasure. What I want is to lift up from the underside towards the embrasure from each tooth respectively. And so what that means is we need to know the direction that the disc is traveling, facing it towards the tooth. Then we're not going to cut down into the embrasure. We're going to lift up and it's going to brush in the correct way. So I'll try and show that. If you watch closely, you'll see the disc is moving in this direction. So we're going to apply it below the contact and allow it to pull upward. The disc is inverted. The diamond side is not on this side, okay? It's inverted, the inverted disc. So we're going to apply it gently here. And then we get to use it on the corresponding side, which is over here. And you can just see that it's rounded those edges really, really nicely. We're going to change the direction of the movement. Okay, so now the disc you can see is actually going the complete opposite direction. So if we take it from here, it's pushing up again. And the benefit of using this technique, I've just switched it back again, is that you can actually push somewhat in and then come up over the contact point a bit, and it doesn't dig down into it. Now on the occlusal, I'm going to use a flame burr just to refine my anatomy. So to polish, I use Style Italiano's product that they made with Diashine. It's called Lucida, and it's a water-based polishing compound. It's just a paste, and this is the shape of the polisher. It's just a felt polisher. The reason I like to use the Lucida instead of other polishers is because I just try and maintain the anatomy that I was carving before with my instruments. Now you can see on the mesiopalatal that it looks like there's a little bit of excess flash, and we can't use the Softflex disc there because it's going to overly traumatize the gum, and it will also remove too much from our interproximal zone. So there's a few ways that you can get to that interproximal flash. I don't use a high speed there because the high speed is very aggressive, and so what it might do is unfortunately damage the tooth. So I try to use some other techniques. One of them is to use a serrated strip, okay? So like a saw. So if there's any excess there, this can be helpful for fixed pros as well. It's nice tight contact. this can help to remove it. Now this isn't always successful in removing excess flash, but it is another technique that you can use. It's a really tight contact point, so sometimes just using this can help to make that contact point a little bit less tight. Now you can still see that excess flash, so even when I'm trying to curve, it's just not able to cut that excess bit of flash on the mesiopalatal. You can see the degree to which I'm curving this saw, and I'm applying pressure down with my thumb as well, where I know that that excess is, just so that we're following the anatomy of the tooth. You can see that that's just managed to get a little bit of it. If you still have excess flash at the cervical, and you can check with the probe, there is just a little bit there. What you can do is you can use these interproximal polishing strips. They're designed with the rough area, a smooth area, and then a less aggressive side. There's two different types. There's a really smooth gauge, and then and this one is sort of coarse and medium coarse. So I don't generally use the smooth ones, but the way to insert is to pick the side. So we want to work on the mesiopalatal of the 6. So we are going to want the abrasive side to be towards the 6. So we're feeding it through just gently at the clear side through the contact. Okay, and then when we're there, we're just going to side to side, but with a bit of pressure towards the cervical of the tooth that we're working on. Now, you can use it like this. There's any manner of different ways, but the objective here is just to gently remove that excess flash. And what we don't want to do is damage the tooth in doing that. So then we go through to the not as coarse side, and in the mouth, I'm obviously doing this on a model, but in the mouth you can't operate from this side. So you would come from the front, and then you'd have your fingers pushing backwards in like that. So we're still able to get that curvature from the front direction in the mouth. Sometimes you can use artery forceps to help as well, just to hold one or both sides. It's important not to do this until you know that the contact point is clear, because otherwise it will continue to break. So the contact point being clear by using the saw was what allows us to use this at this step. Feed that through again, and just making sure that the distal of the 5 is clear in the same way. And then we're just gonna floss. And when you don't find that your floss frays when you pull up, that's generally a good sign. Nice amount of resistance there. You can get the floss through. That's exactly what we want. I hope this has been helpful. This has been a tutorial on how to do Class 2 restorations.